Hello everyone and welcome to Optimizing RuneScape. Today we're going to be looking at implementing a tech tree for the Old School Runescape quests. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a tech tree is, it's basically a graphical representation of all the dependencies and requirements that you need to unlock a particular aspect of a game. The most prominent example in my mind is of Civilization 5, where you're trying to take over the world as you gain these different technologies and make these different discoveries, and you can easily see what you need to do before you can obtain any particular technology. So that's what we're going to try to do today, except for the quests in RuneScape. I've already created a new GitHub branch and an initial file, so with that, let's just get into it. So I've basically broken down the tasks that we have to do into three sort of vague tasks. The first one is to get a list of all the quests, which should actually be pretty easy since the Wikipedia already has a article on that contains all of the quests that are in the game. So that's going to be pretty easy. The next thing that we have to do is get a list of the requirements for each quest. The difficulty here is that we're going to have to actually parse the HTML that comes from here. Final thing that we have to do is implement a directed acyclic graph. With the printing, I'm going to be following this article here. It has a very simple way of implementing this kind of graph, and at the end of it we have these ways to kind of plot it in matplotlib. Should be a nice way to visualize what we have. Okay, so the first task is to get a list of all the quests. The way that I'm going to do this is, well, one option would be to parse this file too in order to get it sort of programmatically implemented. But in the interest of doing this quicker, I'm basically just going to copy all of the tables and put them into Excel, since Excel is going to let me basically copy that individual column. And what I can do in my text editor is if I paste it there, then I get that list looking like that. So that's going to be pretty useful. I can go back and try to get all the member quests as well. Okay, so now we have all of those quests in a single file. What I'm going to do now is very quickly turn all of these into into strings. So now that we have a list of all of those quests, the next thing that I want to do is to be able to go to one of those quests' Wikipedia page. So I made a function convert quest into URL that will basically turn the quest assistant into something that can actually be clicked on, which will open up the wiki page for that cook's assistant. Then what I want to do is actually open up that Wikipedia page in Python and parse that HTML from that page. Okay, so I finally got the code for parsing the Wikipedia HTML set up. It's a little bit janky, it's quite a lot of nesting for what I would like, but I guess it works, so that's okay. The way that it works, like what it's doing if we go to the Wikipedia page, for example, for Legends Quest, we can see here the list of all the requirements that are there. And if we look at the HTML, you can get this by just clicking inspect here. There's a whole bunch of HTML that corresponds to all the requirements for each quest. So each line in here corresponds to a different skill requirement. If we get down to low enough, one of these lists starts to correspond to all of the quest requirements. And basically what we want is we just want this first one. So although it gives us extra detail about all of the other prerequisite quests, we just really want those top level ones, since our code will be able to give us those if we plug that in. So what I mean is, if we go back over here and plug in the quest requirements for Legends Quest, when I run that code, it gives me Family's Crest, Heroes Quest, Shiloh Village, Underground Pass, and Waterfall Quest. Looking back here, those are all the top level ones, right? So Underground Pass, Waterfall Quest. If I want to then figure out what the requirement is for something like Heroes Quest, then when I print it, it'll give me a second set of them. So Shield of Arav is required, lists Lost City, and so on. So that's what we find in here. So everything seems to be working okay, which is great. So even though we didn't really want to include all of those other quests, we now want to maybe have some code that can do that for us. Okay, so I found a problem where the Shiloh Village quest, for example, doesn't have the right requirements, and the reason for that is because the way that we parsed Legends Quest was based off of this syntax, so completion of the following quests and then a list, whereas for Shiloh Village the way that it works is that it says just completion of Jungle Potion. Okay, so it looks like I have it working. So now when I ask for the quest requirements for Shiloh Village, it tells me that Jungle Potion is that requirement. What I can do now is I can go back into my tests. I don't know if I've shown this yet, but I just did some tests. One of these classes is to do these deep tests where I'm checking all of the prerequisites. Whereas I also have one for shallow quests, which I'm just testing that kind of first layer. So for Shiloh Village, we can check to see if it passes that Jungle Potion test. And we can also add in a new test for the deep ones, since it's actually the same here. And it's very easy the way I've formatted it. Okay, so the problem here is that this needs to be replaced with an else statement, or an elif rather, because it's asking if the word completion of is in there, but completion of is in both of those. So I need to check the longer sentence before I check the shorter one. So hopefully that will fix that. 2 errors, not enough values to unpack still. So I'll be back in a second when I try to figure out why that's crashing. Okay, nice. So I figured it out. If we go back to this place here, if we look at the prerequisite for, what was it, Shiloh Village, Jungle Potion has this line here which says completion of Druidic Ritual. The problem is when we were looking at Shiloh Village, it had this quest symbol. And what I did originally parse these two things because they're both hyperlinks. If we look at the HTML, we see that both that quest point link and the Jungle Potion link are both hyperlinks. And so I was assuming that any time a quest was given in this form, that there were going to be these two symbols and I would always get the second one. But like we're seeing with Jungle Potion, it's not always there. So all I did was make a check to see whether or not there are two symbols, and if there are, and no matter what, always take the last one. So hopefully if we go through back to our code, and we try to print the requirements for Jungle Potion, I can go through and find out that yes, Druidic Ritual is required. Now we go back to our tests. Okay, and let's bring back our full deep one and see how that goes. It does take a bit of time. Oh wow, so it doesn't actually, so it looks like we have already discovered an issue with Legends Quest. Although it's pretty small, it says that it needs Jungle Potion, but for some reason it's missing the requirement for Druidic Ritual, which is kind of weird. So that's actually one of the benefits of kind of rewriting it or doing it in this programmatic way, is that as long as each individual quest, like these fundamental ones, are encoded, like if we code them up, then we can build up these arbitrary trees really easily. So hopefully that'll be able to catch more issues. For now, I actually want to add Druidic Ritual into the Legends Quest requirements. And now let's try to go back through and hopefully we can print all of the quests in the game. So at the end of this, what I would actually do is probably put this in a table, just because this is obviously going to take a long time if I'm running it every single time and for every quest. Whoa, Dragon Slayer 2 coming in with a lot of options. Whoa, that's got to be the highest number. Making friends with my arm is similar. And there we go. Awesome. Wow, that's so exciting. So I have programmed every single quest. I know all of their requirements, and this basically forms a tree for that directed acyclic graph that we wanted to build first. I have it set up where I can plot stuff, but the graph is pretty horrible. So it's nice. I like that it looks like this because that's kind of the complexity that I was hoping to see. But it's really ugly. So I'm going to try and hopefully there's a way that I can improve the way that this looks. We'll have to see. Okay, so I went through a bit of the code on my own just because there was a lot of finicky things that I had to figure out. And then now what I have is this kind of picture. So basically what I did was instead of trying to just get it to automatically sort the different graphs, what I did was I divided the quests into different tiers. So everything in this column are going to be quests that you can complete without any other quest requirements. So you can do these right off the start of your account. In the next line, you basically have to complete some quests in this first line. So not all of them, but all of the quests that you do have to complete for animal magnetism are going to be in this column. Similarly, to finish between a rock, for example, all of your requirements are going to be within this tier. Okay, if we keep going to the next one, contact is going to require some quests from this tier, possibly from the tier before it, but the idea is that here we have this progression where ultimately the highest tier quest that you can have is Song of the Elves, because it depends on Morning End Part 2, Part 1, sheep herder, it also has roving elves, and so on. So there's lots of dependencies. This is still pretty ugly, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to make this a little bit nicer, and we'll see kind of how that works out. I made a few new updates, mostly with the coloring. I also made the text get printed in title case. And what we have now is that the different colors, or of course, like each column now has the different tier color that it's associated with. So all of these quests in that first column are what I'm calling tier 0 quests because they require no requirements. And you'll notice that the colors now represent the quests tier itself. So for example, Song of the Elves here, a tier 7 quest, depends on Morning's End and on Making History. So both of these are coming from Song of the Elves. That means that if I zoom into an arbitrary point here, like freeing Pirate Pete from Recipe for Disaster, I can see the color of this line is green, and it means that if I complete freeing Pirate Pete, I'm gonna unlock at least one of the requirements for a tier 4 quest. So that's kind of interesting. There's actually another way that I can look at it by setting this term here to false. And what it ends up doing if I compile it first is that now it's going in the opposite direction. So instead of showing you what the requirement color is, it's now showing you which quest it needs a requirement from. So now if I zoom into something like Legends Quest, that one's a little bit hard to see, but you can see there are 2 blue quests, 1 red quest, 1 brown quest, and another red quest. So that means that there are 2 tier 0 quests, and I forget all the numbers, but the idea is that you can look into a particular quest, 2 reds, a brown, and a blue, and you know that Devious Minds requires 2 tier 0 quests, a tier 1 quest, and a tier 2 quest, which is pretty cool. So that's basically what I wanted to figure out and what I wanted to do today. It's a little bit hard because there's so many lines and so much like font and text and stuff, but I think it's a really cool representation. I like the fact that you can change the colors to change which kind of view you're looking at. But yeah, but I do like seeing this data being represented in a different way. I think that's something that hasn't really been done before, but has kind of always been an option to look at it. So I think it's cool that we can explore stuff like that. So I'm probably going to make a Reddit post following this video to try to show off what I did today. Let me know if you have any other ideas. I'd be super interested to see where other people might want to take this or what kind of inspiration you might get from this. So thank you very much for watching.